Hello everybody, Levi Clay, and I am back again for another question and answer video. As you can see, I'm set up in my new studio, new house. It's looking nice, got a nice thing going on behind me, some nice guitars behind me, which is cool. And because they're on the wall, it kind of means that I can switch them in and out to keep things looking interesting, because the guitars will probably be more interesting than anything I have to say. So this question comes to us via YouTube. And the question is, Levi, I love your content, man. Really professional and skillful. Your ear amazes me watching the transcription vids. I'm a full-time guitar tutor here in New Zealand, and I was curious how you go about lesson plans. Do you make one for each student every week, or do you have an overarching idea for where the student's progress should be headed? I teach 40 to 60 kids and adults a week, and individual lesson plans, as you can imagine, would take up to 3 hours. So I'm wondering, do I suck it up and do them, or is there a more efficient approach? Cheers. Lesson plans. This is a subject close to my heart, if only because I, as part of my licentiate in music teaching, had to write a lot of lesson plans. And I've always obviously been very passionate about education, about teaching, about the art and the importance of conveying information, and obviously the placing the importance on the student. Everything has always been about the student for me. Having said that, it's worth pointing out that I'm not quite in the same position that you are, because I do not make my sole income from teaching. I don't need to do 40 to 60 kids a week. In fact, I don't teach any beginners. And I probably, on a busy week, teach 5 people because I don't advertise my teaching, really. I like that. I like knowing that the people that come to me are coming to me because they want to work with me, rather than coming to me because I'm the local guitar teacher. It means that there's this mutual respect between myself and my students, which creates a really nice work environment, to be honest. And I find that that kind of works for me, and it works for my students. But I also appreciate that that doesn't work in your scenario, because you're a full-time teacher, 40 to 60 kids. I can relate to your problem there, having to write lesson plans. But let me give you some insight into the way that I teach. So I definitely have a kind of overarching lesson plan, a methodology which I work from in my brain with each one of my students, and I'm not saying that I keep everything strictly to that, but using that as a framework of the direction in which we should be heading, and having enough of a robust teaching materials selection to be able to branch off and go in different directions depending on the needs of the student is easily doable for me. So I think if you want to be a good teacher, it's very important to put as much time in as possible into having that bigger plan. Understanding. Let me give you an example. So a concept that I tend to work on with a lot of students that approach me is, as you probably know, the importance of intervals, the understanding of intervals. My concept is very simple. If I can see root notes on the neck, then I can see chord shapes. If I can see those chord shapes, then I can see arpeggios, and if I can see arpeggios, I can see scales. If I can see scales, I can see chromaticism. And using that, and working in this Mick Goodrick kind of parallel modal theory rather than derivative, what that means is that I find it's very easy to work with students on minor 7 vocabulary when I begin working with them. And then we'll very quickly start looking at dominant 7 vocabulary, understanding the difference between minor 7 chords and dominant 7 chords, understanding the difference between minor 7 arpeggios and dominant 7 arpeggios, and then understanding the difference between the relevant colour tones that you would add to those to make Dorian and Mixolydian. Because as you well know, the difference between Dorian and Mixolydian is only one note. It's that third. So that's a fantastic way of learning where that third is. No matter where you're playing, if you can play Dorian, which I find a lot of rock guitar players can, if you play Dorian well, and we then start to get to grips with where the third lives in any place on the neck in relation to everything you already know, you've got information from that. And then from there, depending on the taste of the student, you can actually go in lots of different directions. You can do the country vocabulary with that. I might branch off into some of my Brent Mason-esque vocabulary for the Mixolydian content. Or if they're more of a jazz fusion player, then I might take it down the route of, from there we might talk about, well, you know the blues scale, that's got the flat 5. So you actually already know the Lydian dominant scale, because that just requires us to understand what the sharp 11 is, what the flat 5 is in relation to our chord. We already know it, so we should be able to play Lydian dominant. If they're more into straight ahead jazz, from that point, and I like doing this actually, I'll talk about diminished chords, the relationship between a diminished chord and a 7 flat 9 chord, and understanding diminished arpeggios as a substitution for use on dominant 7 chords. So that's just 3 little quick examples of how you can branch off and do different things based on that information. And again, all of those lessons are planned out. I've taught them many times in my career, so it's really about addressing the needs of the student. But being a good teacher is about listening, right? Listening to what your students are doing, trying to get in there, see things from their perspective, find out what their unique problems are. So what I tend to do, because most of my teaching tends to be on Skype, and of course if anyone wants to hit me up for Skype lessons, always happy to do those. What I tend to do, what I like to do, and this was recommended to me by another teacher friend of mine actually, is every now and again I'll type some notes out during the lesson just into the Skype chat log, so that I never lose track of every single student's idiosyncrasies, the things that are unique to that student, the areas that I feel they need to work on. What you're talking about, writing lesson plans for 40 to 60 kids, totally not really feasible, is it? It just can't really be done in an effective way that isn't going to suck up all of your time. So I think the key is flexibility. Having lesson plans is very important if you're a serious teacher who cares about the development of their students. You don't just have random lessons. It's lesson A leads to lesson B, which leads to lesson C, which leads to D, so on and so forth. The sense of development, rather than, I've been working on this week, this week, check this out. It's not so cool. So yeah, it can take a long time, but if you really are serious about teaching, it's not a bad thing to do. In fact, it shows a lot of integrity for your art form, i.e. teaching, if you're willing to put in the time and effort into the actual teaching materials that you're working on with people. So it's a really hard one. 40 to 60 kids, you're going to need it, because unique lesson plans for every single one of those kids, not going to be an effective way of doing anything. So I do feel for you, but I guess, as I say, I'm not really the right person to ask about that, because I'm not a full-time teacher. I do a lot more transcribing than I do teaching. Hopefully that was of some use to you. Hopefully it was of some use to anybody out there in YouTube land. If it was, please do hit that subscribe button. You'll find that below. You can also check me out on Patreon up here. And check out some of my other videos in the top right and top left. Just clicking that subscribe button, dropping me a comment. It does really help the channel out, and I do appreciate your support. It's absolutely amazing the things that you guys have helped me to achieve in my career. Couldn't do it without you. I do it all for you. I will always be doing the YouTube thing because I love it. Peace out, guys, and I will see you for another video soon. Bye.